Welcome to a lesson with Dr. Powell. Let's take a look at factoring trinomials, all right? Or things like this, like 8x squared plus 2x minus 15. Now I'm going to give some motivation for it, so it's just not hocus pocus, and hopefully it helps us to kind of think about what's going on. Kind of the idea for what we want to do is we're factoring it to something like this. Let's look at what this 2x is and where it comes from. It actually comes from, so if this is like something times x, not something times x right there, it actually comes from the inside plus what comes from the outside, meaning this times this and this times this, you add them together. O plus I is equal to 2x. That works in a FOIL process. If you think about the actual labels for what's happening when you do FOIL, first, last. And FOIL actually has a reason why it's named like this. First, or so FOIL. Okay, so we have O plus I is going to be equal to the middle part. F is 8x squared. L is negative 15 when you multiply that out. Okay, something kind of interesting. So I is the product of these two guys, O is the product of those two guys, F is the product of those two, L is the product of these two. Turns out if you multiply F times L, you're actually multiplying everything you're multiplying in I and O exactly once here. So like this times this times this times this is all multiplied together when you multiply F times L, which means that F times L is actually O times I. So O times I is the same thing as F times L, which is just, and that actually is kind of an interesting idea too, that we can get. In fact, this allows us to just concentrate on O and I and figure out what they are. So let's figure out what O and I are. Okay, O and I, we'll figure out what they are. We know when we add them together, we get 2. When we multiply them together, well, it's actually, we get 2x, I guess, is what we get. But let's just concentrate on coefficients for now. Let's pretend like O is the coefficient and I is a coefficient. So you're not thinking that's 0. I'll make it a O like that. Okay. Okay, it's not a 0, it's an O. All right. So let's, and when we multiply them together, the coefficients, we get 8 times negative 15, which is negative 120. Okay, negative 120 when we multiply them together. Now, for now, let's just concentrate on figuring out positive numbers for these. Now, you notice that this is a negative here, which would come because one of these guys had to be negative in the last, the other one positive, which means like when we're doing this O plus I deal, we're actually kind of doing a subtraction. If you get a negative here, in fact, that's what it means. It means you're going to have a, so let's just think about subtracting. And let's just think about positive numbers. So we're going to be looking for 2 positive numbers that multiply to 120, yet their difference is 2. Well, we could just do 12 and 10, right? That works. Okay. And actually, we're well on our way, because what that means is, and it doesn't really matter which one we choose as O and I. I mean, this could have been 10, that could have been 12. It really doesn't matter here in this particular case. We still end up with the good same factorization here, or equivalent one. So let's let O be 12, at least the coefficient, and I be 10, but it'll be negative 10, right? Because 12 minus 10 is 2, and that's kind of what we wanted here with the subtraction. Okay, so that means that this thing times this thing is going, let's see, so that means that, yeah, this thing times this thing is going to be 12. This thing times this thing is going to be 10. Okay, so, and we also know that this thing times this thing is going to be 8, and this thing times this thing is going to be 15. Using all those ideas, we can get it. For instance, if we think this times this has to be 10, but this times this has to be 8, which means 2 is the only thing that would actually work here, because it has to be a fact. This guy right here has to be a factor of both 8 and 10. There's only one, it's 2, and which forces this guy to be 5, forces this guy to be 4, which forces this to be 3, And we just got to put in the x's and make sure we have, since it's a negative 10, that has to be a negative and that has to be a positive. We have just factored 8x squared plus 2x minus 15. Of course, I had a little motivation, but usually all you have to do really is just, all you really have to do is just make this little chart right here. You can don't even have to write O and I if you don't want to, although it's kind of useful to know kind of where they're going to be positioned here as we go forward. So you multiply the first and the last together to get that, and then you just put down the middle guy is right here too. So you just put the middle guy here, you multiply the two outer things, you put it there, and then you just say, okay, I need two numbers that multiply to that one, and if this guy is plus, then they add to that, and if it's minus, then they subtract to this guy down here. So I hope that kind of helped a little bit with factoring trinomials. Thanks for watching.